PlayStation 5 hardware reveal. Now, there's the question of, are they going to show the box itself, or are they only going to talk about the system architecture? Are they only going to talk specs, or are they going to show the controller? Are they going to show the box? Are they going to show more than we think they're going to show? I get the sense that maybe it's just going to be about specs, but I'd love to see the box itself, like the design of it. I think that's going to generate some hype. Oh boy. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Unfortunately, we had to cancel the talk that we had planned for GDC. Without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jim.
Who's the audience?
There will be lots of chances later on this year to look at the PlayStation 5 games. Today, I want to talk a bit about our goals for the PlayStation 5 hardware and how they influenced the development of the console. I think you all know I'm a big believer in console generation. Starting with PlayStation 4, we've taken a different approach, roughly centered around 3 principles. The first of these is listening to the developers. The feature most requested by the developers, that was an SSD. Also key to make a generational leap while keeping the console sufficiently familiar to game developers. With PS5, the GPU was definitely the area we felt the most tension between adding new features and keeping a familiar programming model. Ultimately, I think we've ended up with something under a month of getting up to speed.
Just the logo.
That's also very important for us, as the hardware team, to find new dreams, by which I mean something other than CPU performance, GPU performance, and the amount of RAM. SSD was very much on our list of directions to explore. To me, the SSD really is the key to the next generation. It's a game changer. And it was the #1 ask from developers for PlayStation 5. A lot of things that would simply have been impossible at Blu-ray disc speeds were now possible.
Wow, this is a
something like
very technical breakdown.
Now, a gigabyte is not much data. Games are using 5 or 6 gigabytes of RAM on PlayStation 4, so boot times and load times can get pretty grim. What if we could have not just an SSD, but a blindingly fast SSD? If we could load 5 gigabytes a second from it, what would change? How long to load 2 gigabytes? And the answer is about 1/4 of a second. I mean, that's amazing. We're talking 2 orders of magnitude, meaning very roughly 100 times faster. The game boots in a second. There are no load screens. The game just fades down while loading a half dozen gigabytes and fades back up again. Same for a reload. You're immediately back in the action after you die. And fast travel becomes so fast it's blink and you miss it. As game creators, we go from trying to distract the player from how long fast travel is taking, like those Spider-Man subway rides, to being so blindingly fast that we might even have to slow that transition down.
Or Mass Effect elevator
Pretty cool,
rides.
right? Ultra-fast SSD gives the game designer freedom. I think almost all of us in the room have experienced this, maybe in different ways. Say we're making an adventure game, and we have 2 rich environments where we each want enough textures and models to fill memory.
God of War does this.
Which you can do as long as you have a long staircase, or elevator ride, or a windy corridor where you can ditch the old assets and then take 30 seconds or so to load the new asset. All those twisty passages are there for a reason. It's a giant distraction for a team that just wants to make their game. What if the SSD is so fast that as the player is turning around, it's possible to load textures for everything behind the player in that split second? Another strategy for increasing effective read speed is to make big sequential chunks of data. Marvel's Spider-Man uses this strategy, and though it works very well for increasing the streaming speed, there's a massive duplication as a result. Some of the objects like mailboxes or news racks are on the hard drive 400 times. What I'm describing here are things that cramp a creative director's style. Either level design gets a little bit boring in places, or the data is duplicated so many times that it no longer fits on the Blu-ray disc. And you end up with hard limits on the player's run speed or driving speed. The player can't go faster than the load speed from the hard drive. And finally, I'm sure many of you have noticed that after a patch download, a PlayStation 4 will sometimes take a long time to install the patch. With an SSD, though, no seeks, which means no installs as you know them today. There's yet one more benefit, which is that system memory can be used much more efficiently. PlayStation 5, the SSD is very close to being like more RAM. No load screens. Design freedom, meaning no twisty passages or long corridors. More game on the disk and more game on the SSD. And finally, those patch installs go away. For PlayStation 5, our goal was not just that the SSD itself be 100 times faster. It was that game loads and streaming would be 100 times faster. So every single potential bottleneck needed to be addressed. So to solve all of that, we built a lot of custom hardware.
I mean,
Bandwidth
he's
target of
breaking
5
down
gigabytes a second, we ended
everything.
Up with, 12, with a 12-channel interface. The most natural size that emerges for an SSD is 825 gigabytes. I mean, it's tempting to add more, but flash certainly doesn't come cheap, and we have a responsibility to our gaming audience to be cost-effective with regards to what we put in the console. We were able to establish that the friction caused by reinstalls or re-downloads would be quite low, and so we locked in on that 825 gigabyte size, while also preparing multiple strategies so that those who want more storage can add it. Let's talk compression for a moment. PlayStation 4 used zlib as its compression format. I learned about a new format called Kraken. Kraken had only been out for a year, but it was already becoming a de facto industry standard. So we hustled and built a custom decompressor into the I/O unit, one capable of handling over 5 gigabytes of Kraken format input data a second, as much as 22 gigabytes a second if the data happened to compress particularly well.
I'm not knowledgeable enough in hardware stuff for me to get everything that he's saying, but I'm kind of following along. For the average consumer, this is almost too much information. For devs, though, this is gold information.
All of our 5.5 gigabytes a second really should translate into something like 100 times faster I/O than PS4 and allow the dream of no load screens and super fast streaming to become a reality. Expandability of our SSD is going to be quite important. Flash is costly, and you may very well want to add storage to whatever we put in the console, and you'd like to take advantage of backwards compatibility to play those games on PlayStation 5, then a large external hard drive is ideal. Or you can copy your active PlayStation 4 titles to the SSD. We will be supporting certain M2 SSDs. These are internal drives that you can get on the open market and install in a bay in the PlayStation 5.
Oh, that's good. So unlike Xbox, it's not all proprietary SSDs for external storage editions.
M2 drives with PCIe 4.0 are now out in the market. By year's end, I expect there will be drives that saturate 4.0 and support 7 gigabytes a second. When games hit beta as they get ready for the PlayStation 5 launch at year end, we'll also be doing some compatibility testing. Once we've done that compatibility testing, we should be able to start letting you know which drives will physically fit and which drive samples have benchmarked appropriately high in our testing. It would be great if that happened by launch, but it's likely to be a bit past it. So please hold off on getting that M2 drive until you hear from us.
There's no glass of water on this podium.
Impressive. The GPU supports ray tracing, but you don't have to use ray tracing to make your game. The GPU supports primitive shaders, but you can release your first game on PlayStation 5 without making any use of them. We have a custom AMD GPU based on their RDNA 2 technology. What does that mean?
Same as Xbox, right? With their own version, probably.
Reduce power. It's dangerous to rely on teraflops as an absolute indicator of performance, and CU count should be avoided as well. One way you can achieve backwards compatibility is to put the previous console's chipset in the new console, like we did with some PlayStation 3s.
Okay, this could be interesting.
That's, of course, extremely expensive. A better way is to incorporate any differences in the previous console's logic into the new console's custom chips, meaning that even as the technology evolves, the logic and feature set that PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro titles rely on is still available in backwards compatibility modes. One advantage of this strategy is that once backwards compatibility is in the console, it's in. We recently took a look at the top 100 PlayStation 4 titles as ranked by playtime, and we're expecting almost all of them to be playable at launch.
What about PS3 and PS2 though? PS1.
PlayStation 5 has a new unit called the geometry engine. More complex usage involves something called primitive shaders, which allow the game to synthesize geometry on the fly as it's being rendered. Smoothly varying level of detail, addition of procedural detail to close-up objects, and improvements to particle effects and other visual special effects.
I've never felt dumber in my life.
GPU is ray tracing.
There's so much information.
There's of course no need to use ray tracing. PS4 graphics engines will run just fine on PlayStation 5. But it presents an opportunity for those interested. I've already seen a PlayStation 5 title that's successfully using ray tracing-based reflections in complex animated scenes with only modest costs.
Maybe you should tell us about that game.
Involved size and frequency.
Maybe show it.
How big do we make? In general, I like running the GPU at higher frequency. Let me show you why. If you just calculate teraflops, you get the same number. But actually, the performance is noticeably different. At 33% higher frequency, rasterization goes 33% faster. Processing the command buffer goes that much faster. The L2 and other caches have that much higher bandwidth.
How much more?
The only downside is that system memory is 33% further away in terms of
my
cycles.
brain can take
but
of this.
The large number of benefits more than counterbalance
I don't know.
that. There's a lot to be said for faster, assuming you can handle the resulting power and heat issues, which frankly, we haven't always done the best job at. Power consumption varies a lot from game to game. When I play God of War on my PS4 Pro, I know the power consumption is high just by the fan noise. But power isn't. PlayStation 5 is especially challenging because the CPU supports 256-bit native instructions that consume a lot of power. After much discussion, we decided to go with a very different direction on PlayStation 5. We built a GPU with 36 CUs. 36 RDNA 2 CUs equates to roughly 58 PlayStation 4 CUs. It is a fairly sizable GPU. Then we went with a variable frequency strategy for PlayStation 5, which is to say we continuously run the GPU and CPU in boost mode. We run at essentially constant power and let the frequency vary. It becomes a simpler problem because there are no more unknowns. There's no need to guess what power consumption the worst case game might have. As for the details of the cooling solution, we're saving them for our teardown. I think you'll be quite happy with what the engineering team came up with. With this new paradigm, we're able to run way over that. In fact, we have to cap the GPU frequency at 2.23 gigahertz so that we can guarantee that the on-chip logic operates properly. 36 CUs at 2.23 gigahertz is 10.3 teraflops, and we expect the GPU to spend most of its time at or close to that frequency and performance. Similarly, running the CPU at 3 gigahertz was causing headaches with the old strategy. But now we can run it as high as 3.5 gigahertz. In fact, it spends most of its time at that frequency.
So that's 10.3 versus Xbox's 12.
Mean all games. When that worst case game arrives, it will run at a lower clock speed, but not too much lower. To reduce power by 10%, it only takes a couple of percent reduction in frequency, so I'd expect any downclocking to be pretty minor. The final of our 3 principles was about finding new dreams. Personally, I feel a game is just dead without audio. Audio typically ends up getting just a fraction of a core. With 3D audio with good locality, the idea is you know the enemy is precisely there, and you turn and you take it out. All those bumps and folds in the ear have a meaning, evolutionarily speaking. Based on what direction the sound is coming from, sound waves bounce around inside the ear, there's some construction.
Diving deep into ears now, breaking down the specs of ears, how we hear.
Encoded in a table called the head-related transfer function, or HRTF. Here's how we measure an HRTF. We've taken hundreds of people through this process, design and build a custom hardware unit for 3D audio. Collectively, we're referring to the hardware unit and the proprietary algorithms we run on it as Tempest 3D Audio Tech. We're calling the hardware unit that we built the Tempest engine. It's based on AMD's GPU technology. Where we ended up is a unit with roughly the same SIMD power and bandwidth as all 8 Jaguar cores in the PlayStation 4 combined. For TV speakers and stereo speakers, we're in the process of implementing virtual surround sound. The idea being that if you're sitting in a sweet spot in front of the TV, then the sound can be made to feel as if it's coming from any direction, even behind you. Headphone audio is the current gold standard for 3D audio on PlayStation 5, but we're going to see what we can do to bring virtual surround sound to a similar level, after which we'll start in on setups with more speakers, such as 6-channel surround sound. One of the game demos allows you to toggle between conventional PlayStation 4-style stereo audio and our new 3D audio. I listened with just an ordinary pair of over-the-ear headphones, and wow! I could feel a difference. 3D audio has that dimensional feel to it. Conventional stereo audio feels smashed flat by comparison. The improvement is obvious.
We'll have to gauge for ourselves.
Advance, but you've probably caught on to what's missing here, namely whose HRTF was being used. It wasn't mine.
That's what I was thinking.
It was the default HRTF.
This whole time.
The audio team analyzed the hundreds that they measured and chose the one they felt. I'd like everyone to be able to experience what I'm experiencing, but obviously it's not possible to measure the HRTF of every PlayStation user. At PlayStation 5 launch, we'll be offering a choice of 5 HRTFs. There's a simple test where you pick the one that gives you the best locality. Maybe you'll be sending us a photo of your ear, and we'll choose a neural network to pick the closest HRTF in our library. Maybe you'll be sending us a video of your ears and your
The
head,
fuck?
and we'll make a 3D model of them and synthesize the HRTF.
Kind of reminds me of like
This is a journey we'll all be
glassless 3D
taking
on
together over the
3DS,
next
but with
few
audio,
years.
surround speakerless,
Hopefully,
surround sound
I've been able to
type of
illustrate
thing.
it. Now comes the fun part. We get to see how the development community takes advantage of that feature set.
Okay,
I'm hoping
okay.
for the completely unexpected. Will it come from audio, ray tracing, the capabilities of the SSD, or something else? I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Oh, like later,
Thank
not
you
today?
for your time today.
Oh. Huh. Okay, that was a lot. So on one hand, there's a lot of information here that a lot of developers, I'm sure, will appreciate. On the other hand, this feels like it's not something that should be hyped to the public. Most of the public, like just the average customer, the average gamer, doesn't care about all of these details. Like, this is way too much information for any customer. Like, this information needs to be broken down in like the most essential information and be presented with a bit of flash, with some examples, you know, with games and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird for them to make a public event out of this, rather than, you know, maybe send this video to developers and then have something that's a little more simplified for the general public. That's, you know, maybe like a 10-minute presentation rather than a 50-minute long lecture. But I would suspect that this is only the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg. Now that they've got the GDC style presentation for developers out of the way, they can now start to focus on, you know, the stuff that the general public wants to see. The box, the controller, and some of the marquee features, some gameplay footage, and some of the games that are coming out for PS5. Some people are saying in the chat, well, Xbox already won. We're still months out. We don't know who is, you know, winning what. Like, PS5 hasn't revealed the box yet. They haven't revealed the controller yet. They haven't revealed the games. Xbox Series X hasn't revealed its launch lineup either. It's all up in the air. But in terms of this presentation on its own, it just probably wasn't what many people were expecting. In terms of pure teraflop numbers, 12 is higher than 10.3. Xbox is more powerful. Does that mean it'll cost more, or will they keep the price points at about the same? People with more technical know-how, like Digital Foundry, will probably break down exactly what these figures mean. You know, just how much more powerful Xbox is compared to PS5. 10.3 versus 12 teraflops, like that difference, like what that ultimately means. I'm sure there will be other people who'll do a better job breaking that down. Let me know what your thoughts are, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.